Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to this special 5-part podcast series sponsored by Affiliated Monitors, which celebrates Affiliated Monitors' 15 years in business as the first entity specializing in independent integrity monitoring. Founded in 2004, Affiliated Monitors provides independent integrity monitoring and ethics and compliance assessments nationally and internationally and across almost all industries. With its knowledge of effective ethics and compliance programs and cultures, Affiliated Monitors is respected for its work as the corporate monitor on matters ranging from multinational corporations to small and mid-sized companies and even individuals. Having served in nearly 750 monitorships, no one has more experience as an independent monitor than the team at Affiliated Monitors. For more information on how an independent monitor can help improve your company's ethics and compliance programs, visit this podcast series sponsor, Affiliated Monitors, at www.affiliatedmonitors.com. In this 5-part podcast series, I'm joined by Eric Feldman, Senior Vice President at Affiliated Monitors. We take a deep dive into the Department of Justice Evaluation of Corporate Compliance Programs, the 2019 guidance, which was released in April of this year. Over the next 5 podcasts, we will explore the changes that are in the 2019 guidance from the Evaluation of Corporate Compliance Programs 2017 guidance, which was released back in February of 2017. The structure and the emphasis of the 2019 guidance, and what does it mean for the compliance practitioner? We will also take a look at each specific prong. So is the program well designed? Is it being implemented effectively? And does the compliance program work in practice? In this 5th and concluding episode, Eric and I visit about what the Department of Justice 2019 guidance means for compliance practitioners and how you can use it in conjunction with the Benkowski memo to evaluate your compliance program. This special 5-part series is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for our 5th and final episode of the 5-part exploration of the 2019 DOJ guidance. I'm joined by Eric Feldman, the Senior Vice President at Affiliated Monitors, the sponsor of this podcast series. Eric, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Eric, in this episode, we're going to try to give some final thoughts, conclusions, see where we may have been and where we may be going. But one of the things that I know has been in the commentariat world has been how to use this document. It's obviously written by prosecutors at the Department of Justice for their use in evaluating the efficacy of a compliance program that's under investigation or at least is in front of the Department of Justice. They make that clear by the references to the now called Justice Manual and the U.S. Sentencing Guidelines. But I was wondering from your perspective, as someone who has been a corporate monitor, as someone who has been on the government side of things and now helps companies put together or evaluate, design, create, and implement compliance programs, how would you suggest a compliance practitioner use the 2019 guidance?
Well, that's a great question, Tom, and I think that companies need to look at this as a treasure trove of opportunity because it gives detailed insight into how prosecutors are going to be thinking, how they're being directed to think about a company's ethics and compliance obligations, and whether they're going to get credit for it at the end of the day. Wei Chen, who drafted the first guidance at DOJ, which is largely incorporated into here in the form of questions, and so all of it is still extremely relevant. She wrote an article that said, "Don't obsess over updated DOJ compliance guidance," and she talked about the fact that this is for prosecutors. And so companies ought not obsess over every detail of it because it really is meant for prosecutors rather than guidance meant for best practices for companies. And I have to tend to disagree because I really do think that anything that is used by the prosecutors to determine how they're going to charge at the end of the day is going to be valuable, invaluable, in fact, insight into how companies should be structuring their programs. Now, Way points out that it really is the lowest common denominator. The minimal standards are laid out here, and not best practices. And I'm not quite sure about that, because if you look at all of the questions that are in the new guidance, there's some pretty insightful emphases in there. Things like culture are, for the first time, cited throughout the entire document in every aspect of the compliance program and making it effective. It's about changing the culture. So I think it is valuable. Interestingly, right up front in the guidance, it talks about at the time of the offense and at the time of a charging decision, there is a window between those two times for remediation. And that's, for the first time, I think DOJ is specifically laying out for the company that when an offense occurs, and it is always going to occur at some level, from there to the time of the decision by the prosecutors to charge, the companies have a lot more power than they may have originally thought. The company is not powerless at that point. The company can take lemon and turn it into lemonade. And the way to do that is through the remediation of the compliance program and the response to the wrongdoing. I think it's laid out beautifully in here.
Eric, one of the things that struck me about the 2019 guidance was the use of the word culture, and from policies and procedures to help ensure a culture, from conduct and tone from the very top, starting with the board of directors, to senior management, through down to middle management around culture, training, not just on culture, but actually assessing the culture of an organization. One of the key themes I've heard from you over the series of podcasts we've done together now for 18 months has been culture. I wondered if you could give us some of your thoughts around not simply the importance of culture, but how the Department of Justice seems to have embraced culture as a key component of not only a compliance program, but also of a company's entire values going forward.
Sure. Well, I've always thought that the U.S. sentencing guidelines, because it does say that companies need to establish a strong culture, and that was one of the objectives of the guidelines, to establish a strong ethical culture. This new guidance does tell companies how to do that and in what areas culture needs to be a consideration. And as I've always said, and I sound like a broken record at times, I view culture as more than just some squishy social science concept. It is a foundational internal control that guides the behavior of employees. And without that control, all the other rules, regulations, and policies and controls you have in place aren't going to be effective if people don't want to comply, if the culture doesn't support them complying. And this guidance, and in combination with the Benskowski memo, talking about whether or not a monitor should be appointed or forced on a particular company, it points to the fact that the company really can drive its own destiny here. And that has to do with paying attention to the culture and remediating issues after they occur. It really is pretty striking that it does give that power back to the company and insight back to the company.
Eric, one of the things you raised in our prior podcast was how this guidance, the 2019 guidance, ties to the Benczkowski memo, which was released in October of 2018. And you talked about it in the context of the Benczkowski memo certainly laid out a roadmap for companies to utilize to avoid having a monitor. I read that memo a little bit broader than simply that. There was other information, but when you put it together with this 2019 guidance, we have, I think, a coherent set of doctrine around, number one, what the Department of Justice expects in a compliance program. Two, what not only will happen to you, but perhaps, as you said, what power do you have to impact what is going to happen to you if you find yourself in an investigation? And then the final part from the Benczkowski memo is the requirements on the prosecutors to justify utilizing a monitor. Within the context of those 3 points, how do you see those two documents as they fit together, or perhaps in a different direction?
Well, no, I definitely agree with the direction that you're talking about and how they fit together. It's very interesting because while the guidance and the Benczkowski memo provide a roadmap on how to avoid a monitor, on the flip side, there's really no excuse anymore for a company to say, I really didn't know what DOJ was looking for, or I really had no idea what a good program looks like and how to make my program effective, because this memo lays out what it is they're looking for. It lays it out in the Benczkowski memo from the standpoint of company actions between the time of the offense and the time of the resolution. And honestly, while I think the Benczkowski memo is going to drive decisions to not appoint a monitor because it's very specific on what a prosecutor has to prove, vulnerabilities and problems with the compliance program in order to impose a monitor. On the flip side, I think it's going to be very hard for a company that doesn't follow this guidance to be able to say that there's any mitigating reason why, and they shouldn't have a monitor. I think that DOJ is going to use the memo and the guidance as a hammer when they need to for companies that either have no program or no effective program, or one that DOJ defines as a paper program. So there is an opportunity for companies, but there's also a very perilous path if companies don't take that opportunity and that roadmap and follow it.
Eric, that would seem like a great point for us to end on. This has been just a fantastic podcast series. I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me on this. I look forward to seeing what we come up with next time.
It's my pleasure, Tom. Thanks.
This is Tom Fox again. I hope you've enjoyed this special 5-part series sponsored by Affiliated Monitors, focusing on the new 2019 DOJ guidance around corporate compliance programs. For more information on Affiliated Monitors, check out their website, www.affiliatedmonitors.com. If you've listened to this podcast, you'd like more information, check out the FCPA Compliance Report, where I have a written, detailed piece on each episode if you've listened to this on iTunes and want more information. Thanks again for listening.